Hello students, today we are going to study a new chapter of our class 10th science NCERT textbook, that is chapter number 11, Human Eye and the Colorful World. So, the topics which we are going to cover in this chapter are human eye, accommodation of eye defects, dispersion, atmospheric refraction and scattering. So in today's session we are going to cover two topics, human eye and accommodation of eye. So let's proceed further. Human eye. As we all know that human eye is a naturally occurring optical instrument and we have a pair of eye in us, and function is that it enable us to see, otherwise without it we can say it enable us to see, it helps us to see. Without human eye we can't imagine our life on this earth. Without it the whole world would have been a dark place for us. So here is the internal structure of human eye which is given, about which we will study further in this session itself. Then human eye is a spherical ball with small bulge in the front part and it is located in eye socket. So as we can see that it is a spherical ball. So this way it is a spherical ball with small bulge in the front part. This way there is a small bulge in the front part and it is located in the eye socket. There is a socket present which is known as eye socket where our human eye is located. It has two layers that cover it, that is sclerotic or scleroid and the choroid layer. So as we can see here that this is the sclera, that is this is the scleroid layer, and inside this there is a choroid layer. So these are the two layers which protect the human eye. I hope you are clear with this. Now let's see the function of scleroid and choroid. Scleroid is the outermost covering. So this is the outermost covering which we term as scleroid, and it consists of white fiber. So as we can see that it is white in color, so it consists of white fiber and its function is to protect all the parts of eye. It protects all parts of the eye. Then let's study about the function of choroid. Choroid is a grey membrane and it is choroid is a grey membrane, and from the inner side its function is to darken the eye from inside so that no internal reflection takes place. What is its role? Simple. It darkens the eye from inside. Here it darkens the eye so that whenever any light is reflected, it do not reflect the internal portion of the eye. So we studied the function of scleroid and choroid. Scleroid is the outermost covering, choroid is the inner covering. Scleroid consists of white fibers and it protects all the parts of eye, and choroid is a grey membrane which do not let internal reflection to take place inside the eye. It darkens the eye. Now apart from these two layers, the human eye consists of cornea, iris, pupil, ciliary muscles, lens, retina, blind spot and optic nerve. So we will study about each of them in detail. First is the cornea. Cornea is the white part of eye center and it acts as window to world. So as we can see in the given diagram or in the given figure, this is cornea. This is the eye and this bulge portion, this is the cornea. I hope that I am making you clear. Then comes the iris. Iris is colored part of eye, and it holds the pupil and also adjusts the size of the pupil according to the intensity of light. So as we can see, this is the eye. Okay, this is the bulge part which is termed as cornea. This is, here we have the iris. So this is the iris, and here we have the pupil. Okay, now what is the function of iris? It is the colored part of eye. As we can see that somehow brown colored iris, somehow blue colored iris, right? Then what is there? It holds the pupil, and it also adjusts the size of the pupil according to the intensity of light. It adjusts the size of the pupil. If there is bright light, it adjusts the size of pupil according to that. If there is dim light, that is, if there is dark light, it adjusts the pupil according to that. In bright light, as we can see that the size of the pupil decreases, it becomes small. In dim light, that is in dark light, the size of the pupil increases so that we can see clearly even in dark. Now, pupil it is black in color that absorb all the light rays falling on it. It get constricted when light intensity is high, and it get expanded when light intensity is low. So as I told you, this is the cornea, this is the iris, and here we have the pupil. So what is pupil? It is black colored spot, and that black colored spot absorbs all the light rays falling on it. So that's why it absorbs all the light rays falling on it, and that's why only the iris helps the pupil to to adjust the size of the pupil according to the intensity of light. So here, as we saw and as we learned, that the pupil gets constricted when light intensity is high. Constricted means it gets contracted, it becomes small when there is bright light. As we can observe that when we go in sunlight, our eyes become smaller. That is, our pupil becomes smaller. Why? Because due to high light intensity, the pupil gets constricted. Due to bright light, the pupil gets constricted, and it gets expanded when light intensity is low. When there is dark light, it gets expanded. Whenever we want to move in a dark room, we have to expand our eyes. Then only we can see the object which is kept in dark. I hope that you are clear. Now comes the ciliary muscles. Ciliary muscles hold the lens, and it adjusts the focal length of the lens. So as we can see in the diagram, these are the ciliary muscles. Here we will do it. This is the cornea, this is the iris, and these are the ciliary muscles, and here are the lens which are kept. I'll just make it clear for you. Pupil, ciliary, just a sec, ciliary muscles and the lens. Okay, so here ciliary muscles, it holds the lens. What is the role of ciliary muscles? It holds the lens, and it adjusts the focal length of the lens. So for that, first we should know what is focal length. Focal length is the distance between object and the lens, that wherever that object is kept plus the lens which are present in eyes, the distance between them is known as the focal length. So that is adjusted by the ciliary muscles. Now comes the convex lens. Convex lens is a cellular structure. A cellular structure is there resembling the convex lens. So, as we can see here that these lens which are present, these generally represent the convex lens. So, they are the cellular structure which resemble the convex lens, that is diverging lens. It is that which split the reflected ray in all directions. But here the rays which are used are converging lens. Converging lens. I hope you are clear. Convex lens, that is converging lens. Sorry for the printing mistake. Converging lens, that is whenever a light ray enters or whenever the reflection of any object enters, it tracks, or we can say it passes through the lens and then it gathers at one point. So this is the reflection of the object at the retina. So this is the perfect, or we can say this is the exact reflection of the object. And diverging is that it splits the reflected rays in all the directions. Then comes the retina. Retina is the screen of eye where image is formed. This whole portion is the retina. It consists of two types of cells, cone cells and rod cells. Cone cells are the cells that respond to colors. Why we can see colorful things? Only because of the cone cells. If cone cells are not present, then we should not rectify, or we should not recognize any colors. Rod cells are that respond to the intensity of light. Then comes the yellow spot. Yellow spot is a point on retina where most clear image is formed. As I told you that as the reflection of the object or the rays or the reflected rays passes through the lens, they converge, they meet at one point, and that point where they exactly meet is known as the yellow spot. Where anywhere they can meet, but actually they give their reflection in all the directions inside the whole retina, but the exact point where they give the maximum reflection is known as the yellow spot. Where the most clear image is formed, that is known as the yellow spot. Then comes the blind spot. Blind spot is that point on retina where no image is formed. As we can see that here at this portion, no image is formed. So this portion is known as blind spot. Got it? Optic nerve. Optic nerve is a nerve that connects the eye to brain. What happens? Whatever messages are passed from the eye, if I can explain, I can say that whenever any image enters in the, or whenever any object's image enters in the eye, so what is that object? Who gives us the message? Brain. So eye passes that image to the brain. So this message of the image is passed to the brain by the optic nerve, and the brain gives the signal that this is the object, and that way we can recognize, and it is done within I can't say even in microseconds, less than that. Then the fluid is present between cornea and lens called as aqueous humor. As we can see here, this is the aqueous humor. So this fluid is present between the cornea and the lens. What is the function of this fluid? It is watery fluid which is present in the anterior part of eye. Anterior part means outer part. outer part of the eye, and its function is to protect the anterior part of eye from collapsing. It protects the outer portion of eye from collapsing when there is sudden change in atmospheric pressure. If there is any sudden change in the atmospheric pressure, it protects the outer part of the eye from collapsing. And also it is the fluid that flows out from eye when we wink our eyes, so it washes the eye and also keep it moist. So whenever we wink our eyes, there is some type of fluid comes out of our eyes, right? Watery fluid. So that fluid is this aqueous humor. It washes our eye also and it keeps it moist. Then comes the vitreous humor. This fluid is present between lens and retina. It is a dense jelly-like fluid present in the posterior part of eye. Posterior means this back part. It is present in the posterior part of eye, and its function is to protect the posterior part of eye from collapsing when there is sudden change in atmospheric pressure. So whenever there is a change in the atmospheric pressure, it protects the back part of the eye from collapsing. Plus, it also helps in focusing the image clearly on retina. It helps to focus the image clearly on retina. I hope I am making you clear. Now, what happens when we are standing out in a daytime? So this topic I taught you in further slide, but we are going through it again. When we are exposed to bright light, iris constrict the pupil partially, or we can say pupil shortens, so that right amount of light enters and clear image is formed. As I told you earlier also, that whenever we are exposed to bright light, we can say sunlight, whenever we are standing in a sunlight, the iris constrict, the iris becomes small, it contracts, and the pupil partially, the iris constricts or contracts the pupil partially, or we can say the pupil shortens, the pupil becomes short, so that the right amount of light can enter and a clear image is formed. But whereas in dark room, pupil expands, it gather more light in order to obtain clear image. But whenever we are in a dark room, the size of the pupil becomes larger, so that we can see the image clearly. Okay. Now comes the another topic, accommodation of eye. I hope the human eye is clear. All the parts of the human eye, the internal structure of the human eye is clear. If you are having any doubts, you are free to ask. Accommodation of eye. It is the ability of eye lens to adjust its focal length so that clear image is formed on retina that can be easily recognized by our brain. What is accommodation of eye? The ability of the eye lens, the capacity of the eye lens to adjust the focal length. Focal length is the distance between the object and the image that is formed, so that clear image is formed on retina, object and the lens, so that clear image is formed on the retina, and that image can be easily recognized by our brain. Now let's see it clearly. Let's make it clear. In case of far off objects, what happens if the objects are kept far? In order to see far off objects, our ciliary muscles, lens and focal length undergoes a change. Now, these are the parts of our eye that undergoes change if we want to see the objects. Okay, what happens if we want to see far off objects? The ciliary muscles present here, they will relax, so the lens will become thin and elongated. As we can see here, the lens becomes thin and long, and that's why the focal length increases. the focal length increases, and through that we can see the far off objects. You just make one point clear. Far off objects means the focal length should increase. Focal length should increase. So what is necessary for that? The ciliary muscles should relax and the lens should become thin and long. So because of that only the focal length will increase, and that's why we can see far off objects. Then in case of nearby objects, in order to see nearby objects, the focal length of lens and ciliary muscles undergoes change. That is, in this the ciliary muscles contract. It is the opposite of the objects for if we want to see far off objects, it's the opposite for nearby objects. Now, in this, the ciliary muscles contracts and the lens becomes thick and short, and so the focal length decreases. As I told you in the previous slide, I am repeating it again, that if you want to see the objects whether they are nearby or far off, just focus on the focal length. For far off objects the focal length should be increased, and for nearby objects the focal length should be decreased. So how can the focal length be increased? If the ciliary muscles relax, and so because of that the lens becomes thin and long. Due to this the focal length increases. And for nearby objects, if the ciliary muscles contracts, due to that the lens will become thick and short, and because of that the focal length will decrease. So then only we are able to see the nearby objects. With this we complete two topics of our today's session and of chapter number 11, that is human eye and accommodation of eye. I hope I'm clear and I'm making you clear. So if you have any doubts regarding this or regarding any of the topic which is taught, you are free to ask. Thank you and have a great day.